Secrets of Happily Ever After. I am so excited about my guest today. I say that a lot, but I seriously mean it today. This guest is no stranger. He's been here before, but he's been taking a little bit of a break, and I have made it my goal to bring him back because his marriage content is so brilliant, and I'm so excited to partner with him in this really cool project that we're going to be telling you about. But please help me welcome my guest, Nate Bagley of Growth Marriage. How are you, Nate?
I'm good. How are you, Monica? I think last time I was on your show, the name was a little bit different.
Yeah, it was.
You changed it, and I feel like Secrets to Happily Ever After, we should whisper the entire episode
Oh.
because we're going to be telling secrets.
Oh, Nate, it's so fun to have you here. I think the last time we had you here, you had less children. So let's talk about what's been going on since the last time you were on the show.
Yeah. I think last time I was on the show was before I moved to Costa Rica even. It's been a
Probably.
minute.
Yeah.
So since I spoke to you last, my wife and I packed up all of our things, sold a bunch of stuff, put a bunch of stuff into storage, moved to Costa Rica for almost a full year. We lived a 2-minute walk from the beach. It
So
was a lovely experience and also a very difficult experience. So we lived there for almost a year, came back to Utah, moved back into our house. And the day we moved back to Utah, I found out we were pregnant with baby number 2.
I didn't realize that. That's
Yeah,
exciting.
we literally landed the plane. And my wife and I got home and she was like, I feel weird, took a pregnancy test and was like, hey, check it out. We're pregnant. So it was kind of she's like, we should start trying. And it was like one of those immediate, like it just one shot. So a little shocking. And then for the last year, we have been making it through a really rough pregnancy together with a 2-year-old in the house. So, yeah, it's been the last 2 or 3 years, despite living in Costa Rica, the last two years of our marriage have been really, really difficult. Very stressful, full of a lot of physical and mental and emotional and relational challenges. And I feel like I've been kind of like scraping the bottom of the barrel a little bit, like, oh man, feeling really depleted and tired, as I'm sure many people listening are feeling right now, a little burned out, a little overwhelmed, lot going on. So, but now baby has arrived and the pregnancy, obviously, like my wife has hyperemesis or something where you get like really, really nauseous and sick during pregnancy. And so she was like on IVs for a while. She was taking a bunch of different medications. Her hormones get really wacky as well during pregnancy and like a lot of mental health stuff. So since the baby's been born, things have leveled out a lot. And I feel like I'm getting my wife back and things are normalizing a little bit. And I'm finally able to take some deep breaths. And so, yeah, like, that's why I'm here now. Like Monica called me out of a deep dark cave and was like, hey, you want to talk? I'm like,
Yes.
yeah, okay, let's talk. So maybe we can talk a little bit about struggles of life and getting through them and whatever else you want to talk about.
Yeah, that's great. Well, one thing I want to point out about this is because I've known you for a long time and you've been in the marriage space for an extremely long time, much longer than we've known each other.
Yeah.
It's really interesting when you throw the dynamic of kids and challenges and
Mm-hmm.
all of those things. You learn a lot about yourself, you learn a lot about your marriage, and you get to put into practice all of these things that you've been kind of studying, kind of higher level teaching, but you've never really had to apply those things
Yeah.
until all of the sudden life hits you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wild. How do I put this? Walking the walk is a lot harder than talking the talk. It's just like when putting what you know into practice is the hardest part. And I think it's really easy to listen to a show like this or to read a really good book or watch a TED talk or something and get inspired. You get that dopamine hit and you feel like, oh, I'm better now. Like I'm a better
Yeah.
person because I learned this thing. I see the world a little bit differently because this message or this speaker or this research or whatever shed new light on something that I was struggling with, and we walk away feeling really good about ourselves. But it's easy to fall into the trap that really what makes the difference is putting that knowledge into practice. And that's a big hurdle. Like that requires some discomfort. It requires some risk. It requires some struggle. It requires looking like a failure sometimes because we typically aren't great at what we do the first time at new things the first time we try them. And so, yeah, it's one thing to, in theory, know that like things get difficult when you have babies, or life changes when you encounter mental and emotional struggles. And like there's all these things that we kind of know intuitively, but dealing with them head on and actually like putting into practice the things that we know will work can be a real struggle sometimes, especially if you're feeling depleted,
Yeah.
if you're exhausted, if you're not in a good place yourself. So
And I think your experiences over the last couple of years is going to add like a new depth and richness to what you teach. So I'd love to even just start there. I mean, over the last couple of years, what would you say are the most poignant lessons you've learned, or the content that you've taught in the past that you feel like now has so much more meaning to you?
yeah, there's a couple things. I really love, there's a I'm going to refer to maybe a couple different experts that I really like. Um, there's like two or three that come to mind that whose research and work and books and stuff have really had an impact on me. The first one I want to talk about is Eli Finkel. So Dr. Eli Finkel is a marriage researcher. He wrote a book called The All or Nothing Marriage, and really interesting researcher. One of the things that he talks about in his book is he talks about Maslow's mountain. So it's based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And he talks about how that hierarchy, it's like a triangle with a point pointed upwards. And how at the bottom of the mountain of this triangle are like the basic needs that we need to meet, food, water, shelter, safety. And then as the higher you get up on the mountain, kind of the more resources are required to meet those needs. So love and belonging are somewhere around the middle of the pyramid, and you can't really meet those needs until you've met the needs underneath them.
Right.
Once you've met some of these security and stability needs, then it's like, oh, now I can look for love and belonging. I can look for connection and community and like a deeper meaning to my partnership. And then at the very top of the mountain is this little peak that's like all about self-actualization and realizing your full potential. And I think a lot, I specifically, I'll speak for myself. When I thought about getting married, I thought like, oh, I want to spend all my time at the top of that mountain. Like, I just want to live in this relationship where we're bringing out the best of each other. We're helping each other become our best selves. We're fulfilling our highest potential. We're pursuing our dreams and like, pushing each other to be the very best that we can be. And it was this really great, I think that's a great aspiration to have. But what Dr. Finkel says in his book is that that's the very tippy top of Maslow's mountain. And just like a regular mountain, like Mount Everest, that people, spend their entire lives training to climb, years and years training to climb. Once you get to the top of the mountain, like it requires a lot of resources, oxygen, food, effort to get to the top of the mountain, and especially to like remain up there. You can't stay up there for very long. And when I read his book, it made me realize that like it's okay if your marriage isn't always in that space. That there's going to be periods of time throughout your life where you kind of scale to the top of the mountain and things are amazing and you are fulfilling that full potential. And there's going to be times where you're at the very bottom of the mountain and like your attention and time and energy are spent just keeping yourself alive, just surviving, and that's okay. That's normal. I might have taken too long to explain that, but when I realized that, and then I looked at the last little while of the last couple of years of my life, I was like, oh yes, I definitely have been lower down on the mountain these last couple of years, just trying to meet some of those basic needs and make sure that we're all taken care of. And some of the luxuries and the things that I crave and love most about marriage, I've had to set to the side for a little while, just because it's not realistic that we can have all of those things right now. We don't have the capacity to survive at the top of the mountain right now. We just don't have the resources. So
Yeah. Well, I was going to say too, I think just in that analogy, there's less oxygen at the top of the mountain. So it's not sustainable. You can't just stay there. You have to
right, it's not like there's an abundance of food.
right.
There's not much oxygen. You kind of have to pack everything in,
Yeah.
and if you stay up there too long, you could die. Like, it's just not sustainable.
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah. And so how do you find joy in all levels of the mountain, right? And
right.
realize that this is okay. Like
Yep.
I'm right where I'm supposed to be and I can go back up there, but how do I find joy and fulfillment in these other levels?
100%. Great summary.
So good.
So that's one of those things I learned from Eli Finkel that I really appreciated. All or Nothing Marriage. It's a really research heavy book. It might be worthwhile to, like, if you want to learn more about that, just look up an interview from him. Or if you like the researchy stuff, go read it. It's totally worthwhile. Another expert I really like is David Schnarch, who a lot of his work is built on what's called Bowen theory. And the idea of Bowen theory, or David Schnarch, where David Schnarch's work comes from, is that the individual is not the smallest unit of society. It's actually like a family or a relationship. And that most of the pain points that we experience in life, the anxieties, the stresses, are in response to our relationship with other people. And the reason I really appreciate their work, Dr. David Schnarch and Murray Bowen, is largely because the focus is placed on one's self. It's like, I have control over one thing, and that one thing is how I show up, how I manage my emotions, how I treat my partner, how I respond or react in moments of, like, emotional high emotions, frustration, anger, whatever comes up, and so I think the tendency that we all have is to point a finger at our partner, like, oh, they're the one who's upsetting me, or they're the one who's not engaging in the relationship like I want them to. I care more than they do. I'm more invested than they are. I'm more patient than they are. I'm more, we put ourselves on a bit of a pedestal, and we make all of our intentions really altruistic. We come from the good place, and we kind of assume the worst of our partner, and we point the finger at them as being the problem. And as I've studied Dr. Bowen and Dr. Schnarch, I've learned a lot about taking a deep breath, calming myself down, finding ways to calm myself down, realizing the things that I do that get myself more worked up, and then I've learned to take more responsibility for, like, how I show up and what I contribute to the relationship, because that's all I can control. And having a sense of control is actually really reassuring. It's really grounding. It's really stabilizing. And it's really cool to see what happens when you take responsibility and you say, like, this situation really sucks. Here's what I can do about it. Here's how I can show up as my best self. Here's what I have control over. It's like, oh, okay, I'm not a helpless victim here. Like, there's a lot of things that I can do to change the outcome to something that's more preferable. And I've been really amazed at how often things get better when I shift my focus away from my partner and towards myself. I'm trying to think of a really good story
I was
where
going
this
to
has
say,
happened.
you're like, one of your strengths, Nate, is like telling the stories. So like, give
Yeah.
us a tangible example of what you're talking about here.
Yeah. So my wife and I recently had, I'm just going to talk about what comes to mind. Very recently, this week, we had kind of a pretty big disagreement. I was frustrated because this is going to sound silly, because, like, a normal marriage thing. I came home from work, and sounds so stupid. I'm almost embarrassed to say this. I came home from work. Dinner wasn't ready. It was a little chaotic.
Oh, that's so
And I
cliche.
always call my wife before I come home from work and I ask her if she needs anything. She's like, no, I don't need anything. So I get home, my wife's preparing dinner. It's a delicious dinner. I'm really excited to eat it. But I noticed like we didn't have chicken for the dinner. And I was like, hey, do you want me to run to Costco and get a rotisserie chicken really quick? It's already made. We can add it to this. And she's like, that'd be amazing, but you might miss dinner. Like it might be done before you get back. I'm like, I'll be quick. So I go get the chicken, come home. Dinner's still not ready. Dinner's still not ready. It just takes way longer than expected, to the point where it's like 7:30, and that's typically when we put our toddler to bed, and we still haven't eaten dinner. And so I'm dealing with, my wife is stressed because she's trying to cook dinner and she's got a newborn baby and a toddler hanging on her. I'm stressed because like I'm hungry. I haven't eaten in a while. And I'm trying to like take an angry, frustrated, screaming toddler who's also tired off of my wife, um, so that she can cook. And there's just kind of this whole rigmarole. And I felt hurt and frustrated because I get very limited time with my kids and I cherish that time, especially with my toddler right now. You know, she's feeling a little neglected because new baby sisters come along and she used to get all the attention. Now she doesn't get as much. And so like, I really cherish that time. I want to make sure that that time when I'm home in the evenings, I can spend time one-on-one with her, reading books, playing games, making sure she feels like loved and that she doesn't feel like she's being replaced. And so, that late dinner wasn't a big deal. What the big deal was is that like I didn't get to spend time with my toddler, like good time with my toddler. And I was feeling like the things that were important to me didn't matter to my wife. And there was a bunch of other stuff too, but that's just like a really easy summary. And I was getting frustrated. I was getting worked up. I was starting to tell myself stories. My
Yeah.
wife doesn't care about me. She only cares about herself. My wife is lazy. My wife is bad at time management. I don't know how long I can stay married to somebody who can't even make dinner on time. Really bad judgmental things that just kind of pop into your head,
You
you
were
know?
spiraling.
It's
Yeah.
just like, how long can I live like this? You know, I spent 9 months taking care of her while she was pregnant, making sure that she was fed and taken care of. And like, at what point is she finally going to be able to like chip in and be an equal partner? And a lot of this comes from months and months of just like being a little burned out on myself. And I fully acknowledge that these are like not good things to think. And I was not saying these things to my wife because I know they're not, deep down, I know they're not true, but these are just the things that pop into your head when you're feeling really crappy.
Yeah. Can
So,
I just interject right here that it's very natural? Like, I know my husband has those thoughts often, right? Like, that's a story that just, it's a very, I say cliche, but like, that's
yeah,
always the example. The husband comes home, dinner's not ready, the kids are a mess. Like, and then there's the story that goes with
right.
it.
And then I was telling myself on top of that, the story of like, if I bring this up, it's just going to hurt her feelings. She's going to feel really bad and it's not going to change anything. It's just going to make me the bad guy. Like if I sit down and say, gosh, this is how I'm feeling right now, and it's all your fault, she's just going to spiral and like go into a depression and feel really bad. And I'm a failure as a wife and I'm a failure as a mother and nothing I do is right. And like, so I know I can't say anything. So I'm starting to bottle it up. And she's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. And this is kind of where I was really proud of myself. This is where I did the turn, or one of the things that I did to turn inward and like focus on myself. Because my natural inclination, I'm a venter. Like I like to just, you can probably tell just listening to me, I have a gift of gab. So when I'm experiencing these big emotions, my temptation is to just unload and be like, well, of course I'm frustrated, this and this and this, and I think this and I'm feeling this. And I took a couple deep breaths and my wife was like, what's going on? What's going on? I can tell you're upset. And I was like, you know what? I want to talk about this, but I don't feel like now's a good time because I don't think anything that I'm going to say is going to be productive. And I don't want to hurt you more than you're already hurting. So I just need some time to figure this out and like kind of center myself. She didn't like that. She was pretty upset because she wanted to like hear what was going on because
Yeah.
she
But
loves me and cares about
you were
me.
self-soothing, which is really, really, really good.
Right. But when I was self-soothing, her anxiety was spiking
Yeah.
because she's like, something's wrong and he won't tell me what it is. And I hate guessing and I don't want to assume the worst. And I want to know if I did something like so I can fix it. And so she was starting to work herself up. And so I just decided like if I have to choose between two two versions of my wife that are angry. I'd rather her be angry because I'm self-soothing than angry because I said something that I didn't mean.
Right.
So I took some time. I went for a walk. I called a friend of mine who's always like a really great advocate for our relationship and who I know I can trust. And he helped me kind of get my head right. Came home. My wife was like, "Hey, can we talk? I really want to understand what's going on." And I was able to communicate really clearly from a more like grounded place. Like, I love you. I don't want any of what I say to make you feel like I'm not grateful for everything that you do. I spent like a good 3 minutes telling her all the things I'm grateful for and all the progress I see that she's making, all the good that she brings to my life. And then I say, but this last day or so, I've been frustrated because of this specific situation. And this is how it made me feel. I felt like the things that are important to me aren't important to you. I try really hard. I just want to feel like, the things that are important to me can be a priority to you as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hard for her to hear some of what I had to say, but she received it so much better than if I would have just like vented it in frustration the day before. So it was in that moment, that was a recent moment in my life where I was able to like really consciously think like, what am I bringing to the relationship right now? This is a moment that could tear our relationship down further than it is. Or I can take a minute and think like, how can I approach this from the most appropriate, most healthy, most constructive way possible that addresses the issue, but also doesn't necessarily tear my wife down in the process.
Good job. Good job. That's
Thanks.
really good. I mean, so I want to bring the conversation to this Gottman 7 principles of making marriage work. And I
Yeah,
noticed
that's
that
my third expert.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Well, let's bring it to him because he talks a lot about that self-soothing, being able to soothe yourself and soothe your partner. And I think you did that really well. One of the things I know for me early in my marriage is really important. Like if my husband was having a moment like you were having, I go directly to he's done. Like he's gonna walk out because this is too much for him, right? That was the experience that I had seen growing up. And so I was always waiting for that bottom to drop out. So the only like I think advice I might give to you, what worked for me anyways, is once I shared those fears with my husband, he was really good at saying, I need some time, but I'm not going
anywhere.
I'm not going anywhere. Psst, I'm not going anywhere. Was like our kind of tagline when he could see that fear kind of well up in my eyes, like, oh my gosh, the bottom's going to drop out. He would say, I'm not going anywhere, but I'm going to go to sleep now, or I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to go figure this out. And then I'll come back and we can talk about it. So
that's really smart. And I love that, that Gottman self-soothing principle, and the rules that he sets up for that. It's really interesting. I think, I want to talk a little bit about John Gottman and why he's so important, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't think I don't think you can read a modern marriage book and not have at least one reference to John Gottman in it. That's how big, like in the world of marriage therapy, like John Gottman is so pivotal that there's literally like a timeline that's before Gottman and then after Gottman, if that makes sense. And so, before Gottman, like nothing that marriage therapists did was research based. It was just like all sorts of wild stuff. There's funny stories of like therapists having like foam bats and allowing partners to like whack each over the head, take out their frustration on each other with the foam bats. All sorts of funny stories about pre-Gottman era. And the interesting thing about John Gottman is he's not like a traditional therapist. He's actually an MIT mathematician. And he comes from, I think he's been divorced at least once. He was having a hard time with relationships. And I think he and his colleague had this idea of like, what if we could study relationships and gather a whole bunch of data and then see if we can glean from that data what it is that might predict a relationship to succeed or fail. So he didn't come into studying marriage with any preconceived notions. He didn't even come into his marriage research work with the idealistic view of that he was going to try and save marriage. He just wanted to understand what makes marriages work and what doesn't. And so he set up this lab on a university campus. I think it was at the University of Seattle, I think is the
I
university. It
think
was,
there was one before that, but then he did end up in Seattle, is where they are
anyway.
now. Mm-hmm.
So he had this love lab, and it was basically like an apartment with cameras all over, and they would strap heart monitors to the couples, and they would regularly like take urine samples from them, and they attached these devices to the bottom of their chairs called gigalometers, and they had the two-way mirror, and they had like his research assistants coding people, the people's facial expressions and body language and stuff. And so he'd have these couples come in and stay over the weekend and observe and take as much data as they could, and then hopefully have them come back, maybe a couple times over the years and study, like, how do they engage with each other during conflict? How do they engage with each other when they're like bored and there's nothing going on? What are their biological and physiological responses to stress and all these things? And after several years, it got to the point where he learned the outliers. He learned like the behaviors that, like, combing through the data, it got to the point where he could watch a couple argue for a couple minutes and predict with over a 92% accuracy or 94% accuracy whether or not they would end up divorced within the next 5 years. And
What's crazy
so,
about that is it's not that they argued, it's how they argued.
right. Yeah, it's exactly right. So how they engaged with conflict, how they interacted with each other, he could observe those interactions and be like, yeah, these guys aren't going to last, and be right almost 100% of the time. And it wasn't until he met and married Julie, his wife, who was a therapist. She kind of came along and said, John, this research is amazing.
Yeah.
I think that we can teach couples some of these principles and like, or help them identify some of these problems and teach them better ways of dealing with conflict, with stress, with challenges, with forgiveness. And he was like, I don't know. And she's like, no, I really think we can. And that's kind of where the 7 principles for making marriage work comes from. This book and this workshop that we're going to teach together. Wink, wink. It all originates from this research. He's the first guy in history to sit down and gather research and then develop an entire set of like habits and rules and principles and things that you can do. Like, basically what this book and what this program teaches is these are the things that if you do them on a regular basis, they will strengthen your relationship and prevent you from doing the instinctual things that often sabotage your relationship and send it the opposite direction that you want it to go.
What I think is really cool, and the timing of this is really cool, because in that story you told, you've been studying Gottman for years and years and years. You've been teaching these workshops, you know it inside and out. And now you're having real life challenges in your marriage, like things that are difficult for any couple to navigate.
Yeah. Yep.
But you've got this background of these Gottman principles. And so how do you think that knowing that and kind of having that in your mindset and the way you function informs the way you show up now when there is a real conflict?
Oh yeah. Like, the cool thing about it is, how do I put this? So my wife is a nurse.
Mhm.
And she knows what to do in an emergency situation when somebody's health, like if somebody has a heart attack or they stop breathing. Like, my wife is prepared. She knows what to do. And I've heard stories of her in the room when a patient crashes, and she just kind of goes into this focused mindset where she's like, you do this, and she's like a battle commander, and people are doing chest compressions and keeping this person alive, and she saved people's lives. I don't think I could do that because I don't have the knowledge or the practice. But there's something really powerful that happens when you have the right training, and then the circumstance arises that demands that training, and you can just kind of flip a switch. And I feel like in our marriage, that has been what the Gottman's work has been for me over the last like two to 2.5 years, is frequently throughout our relationship, there have been these really difficult challenges that we've had to face. Our life kind of came to a peak. I'll just kind of paint a picture for you. And I'm not trying to compete with anybody. There's a lot of people going through a lot of struggles. But my wife had a really difficult time. She was pregnant during the peak of COVID while working in the ICU, seeing the very worst cases of people dying, super stressed, being screamed at by patients and family all the time. On top of that, she was dealing with like the hormones and postpartum depression, post-pregnancy. We were dealing with some personal issues, like going on a really interesting faith journey that's been a real challenge and put a lot of strain on some of our relationships as well. And like just so much, there was just so much going on
Not
in
to
her
mention
world.
the financial difficulty of all of this as well.
Yeah, it's just
Adding a
all
baby to the family and working. Yeah,
right.
a
So
lot.
any one of these things, like just being an ICU nurse during COVID would have been a struggle, or just being pregnant with hyperemesis would have been a struggle, or just going through a difficult faith transition would have been a struggle. But doing all three of those things and several others all at the same time, just like really kind of, it was like turning on a pressure cooker. And it was basically from that moment forward for the last 2 to 2.5 years, I have been relying heavily on my training. You know, Gottman's research and training has helped me to identify when things are not going well, identify some of the things that are a common threat to marriage. It's helped me identify, like, when my wife says things that are hurtful but aren't meant to be personal, I can, like, filter those out. It's helped us deal with conflict better. It's helped us repair after we hurt each other's feelings more quickly. It's helped us think about the future differently. It's helped us parent more conscientiously. It's helped us be more gentle with each other. It's helped us establish an atmosphere of gratitude, because we've learned about not just how important gratitude and appreciation are, but like how to express it in a way that actually lands and resonates with our partner. Forgiving one another. Like, there's so many things that we have learned about, like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, the soft startup, the self-soothing, the dreaming together. Like, there's so many cool principles that Gottman teaches that have come in handy in a moment of need. And by no means have I been perfect, but when our marriage felt like it was crashing, just like my wife, when she's in a patient's room and knew what to do, I feel like I have known what to do. And then when things get better, like, I'm also really clear. I'm a firm believer in, like, habits and consistency is really what makes a difference for people. And as things have kind of started to get better, I've noticed that, like, there are certain habits, certain things that if I do them daily, my marriage is pretty much amazing across the board, aside from a hiccup here and there. And I feel like most people, if they simply knew, one of my favorite Gottman quotes is, "It's the small things done often that make the difference." It's not the big grandiose gesture of love or the flowers that you buy once a year for Valentine's Day or Mother's Day or whatever. Like, those things are nice and they're wonderful, but what really matters is the small things done often. And what I really, really love about Gottman's work is it shows you exactly what are the small things that you should be doing on a daily and a weekly basis, that if you did them, you would have an incredible marriage. So anyway, I love Gottman's work.
Well, I think this is a great time to announce that you and I together have put together a Gottman workshop in Utah, where
Yep.
you live.
Yep.
It's going to be March 31st and April 1st.
Yeah.
And it's going to be amazing. But all of those things that you talked about, the soften startup, the self-soothing, the bids for attention, all of those things that Gottman so well researched and put into practice and, like, made very actionable for people. We are going to be teaching one of those workshops. And I think the most important thing out of this entire conversation is that no matter how well you know this, you're still going to meet challenges. Like, knowing this isn't going to prevent conflict. It's not going to make challenges go away. But all of these things can make your marriage stronger if you know the information in this. The 7 principles that make marriage work. It doesn't mean that you get to not have conflict, that you get to not have challenges, that you don't have difficult moments in your marriage. But it means that these things are what make those things worth it, what makes them
Yeah.
work. It's what strengthens the marriage overall and teaches you more about each other rather than breaks down the system.
Yep. So this curriculum was developed by the Gottman Institute. So John Gottman and his colleagues. It's a really awesome course. Both of us, Monica, have been through a training. We've been trained in conducting this workshop. And we're going to be doing it based off of their curriculum. So if you're the type of person who wants to find better ways to deal with conflict, if you want to deepen your intimacy, if you want to build trust, if you want to identify like what are the problems that we can actually solve and what are the unsolvable problems in our marriage that we need to learn to manage, like that's just a huge thing in and of itself. Realizing that there are two different types of problems in marriage, solvable and unsolvable problems, and what to do about each. If you want to like strengthen your friendship and your connection, if you want to learn to like collaborate better and solve problems more effectively, if you want to become a better communicator and get more effective at talking about your emotions and what's going on in your head, like if that sounds like you, if you care about your relationship, if you feel like it might need a tune-up, or you just want to have the tools so that when things get a little bit dicey, as they eventually will, and any marriage is going to face struggles, this is a great workshop that will give you that power that I talked about earlier of like when something happens, when a crisis happens or an argument happens or a challenge comes along, I know what to do instead of just like operating off of instinct or, emotion. Instead of just like reacting and doing the best that you can and kind of like making things worse, which is often what happens, you know what to do, you know what works, and you can have a plan in place. And what I've found for me, and Monica, you can tell me if you're in a similar boat, is that now the conflict and struggles in our relationship are actually a catalyst for connection. Like I'm not scared of conflict anymore. I used to be terrified of it. Now I know on the other side of conflict is like this amazing experience of healing and forgiveness and understanding and deeper connection and intimacy with my partner. And so when we do have struggles like we did last week, on the other side of that is something much more beautiful. And this thought of like, this is the thing that comes to me over and over. The thoughts that just popped into my head is our marriage is strong enough that we can withstand any challenge. Like there's this sense of resilience that comes along when you have these skills, that you have this underlying confidence that whatever struggle comes your way, we have the skills, the tools, and the practice to deal with it and come out on the other side stronger and closer.
I love that so much. And another thing I would say that I've learned in my 20 years of marriage and doing all of these trainings is that all wounds can be healed in a loving, trusting, safe marriage environment. And we all have wounds. I mean, none of us come out of childhood, adolescence unscathed. We all have these wounds, these triggers, these things that are almost unexplainable at times, reasons why we react or respond the way that we do to different triggers in our relationship. But when we have these skills, it's like they heal. And it's so beautiful, the opportunity with a loving, supportive partner to be able to heal all of those wounds. And so I'm so excited to be able to present this workshop. I think it's going to be transformational for so many couples. So there is a link to get all of the details, like time, date, place, all of those things. But if
March 31st to April 1st, and it's going to be in Lehigh, Utah. If you want to just get the basics right now, we'll do Friday Evening will be like a fun date night. It's a combination of like
proponents of date night, aren't we?
Yep. And then Saturday during the day, we'll do the rest of the curriculum. And you'll be out of the door by like 4:30. You'll have time to go. If you have kids, go hang out with your kids, grab dinner. So yeah, that's
have so many tools to be able to take with you. So
right.
If you are in the Utah area, mark your calendars, March 31st through April 1st. It's going to be really fantastic. Make sure you click on the link in the show notes, but we'll also obviously be putting it all over the place. Tell your friends, this is a really cool workshop. There's not anything embarrassing, right, Nate? Like we never
Yeah, we
stand up
don't
and talk about
we
things.
don't make anybody share anything that they don't want to share. It is the other cool thing I do love about it though is it is a really practical workshop. Like it's not you just sit around and get lectured to the whole time. Like we teach a principle and then you go put the principle into practice. And so it's a really interactive situation, not interactive with us, but interactive with your partner. Well, you'll get moments to kind of go off into private and sit down and like practice some of these really cool things and get to experience how awesome it feels to do marriage the right way, the way that is proven by research to make it work. So anyway, it's a really cool experience. And I guarantee you'll walk away feeling closer together. So,
and with your registration, you get a copy of this book, workbooks, and you're going to get Gottman card decks, which are all
those are
fantastic
awesome.
for your marriage. So,
And some other cool bonuses that we're working up right now. So
that's right. That's right.
yeah.
We're going to make sure you leave very, very, very with everything that you need.
Yeah, if you can join us in Utah, March 31st, April 1st, click the link down below in the description. If you can't make it because you're out of state or that weekend doesn't work for you, that's totally okay. Check out the Gottman's book, 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. Reach out to either one of us for resources. And we're excited to hang out with whoever decides to come join us. The spots are limited. So if that sounds like something you want to do, we're only accepting a pretty small handful of couples. We want it to be an intimate experience where you get the attention that you need. And so, yeah, hope you can make it.
Yeah. And if you're not in the Utah area and you're like, I need this in my life, send us a little message because we're thinking about, going on tour with it or whatever. We might have an opportunity to come to your area. So let us know.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Nate. This was fantastic. And I'll let you get back to the amazing work that you're doing.
Go have an awesome day.
To everyone, thank you so much for joining us. And until we meet again, happy marriaging. To learn more ways to deepen your intimacy and strengthen your relationship, make sure you watch this video next on